Welcome to this short video on understanding attachment and how it has an impact on children when they're at school. So we're just going to be looking a bit at attachment and at the different attachment styles, and then I'm going to do a short demonstration of how this may come out in the classroom. Okay, so when we think about attachment can be defined as the primary relationship between the baby and the primary caregiver. That's usually mum, sometimes dad, maybe foster carer, grandparent. So the main person who's caring for the baby. And depending on what that experience is like for the baby, that results in them having different behaviour. So firstly, there are the securely attached child. And for these children, the caregiver is usually very consistent, very predictable, responds to the child's needs. So, for example, the baby cries and the caregiver goes over, picks them up, tries to work out what they need. Are you hungry? Are you tired? Do you need your nappy changing? Are you bored? And would respond to that need. And then that baby learns that actually their needs are recognised, they're worthwhile, and this results in them having a high sense of self-esteem. They feel that they are worthy. And this child takes that experience with them out into the world. So these are the children in our schools who are usually quite happy, settled, can engage with their learning, they can adapt well to change, they probably express their feelings quite well. So they're really secure in the world and they experience the world as a safe and exciting place. Now we're going to look at insecure attachment, and there are three different types of insecure attachment. And it's really important at this stage that I acknowledge that this isn't about us blaming or judging or criticising the parents of these children. These parents are doing the best they can, and it's usually because they're completely overwhelmed by their own needs, that they're not able to meet the needs of the children in the way that they perhaps need it consistently. So the first attachment style we're going to look at is the avoidantly attached child. And for these children, their experience has possibly been that their parent is either physically or emotionally unavailable. So what these children learn is that they need to be very self-sufficient. They feel that their needs are not recognised, they're not worth thinking about, and these children develop patterns of avoidant behaviour as they expect rejection. So in school, they may be the children that perhaps sit themselves away from other children, perhaps don't engage as well. They're not necessarily disruptive, and they often get on really well with the task, but there's sometimes the children by, say like the first half term that you think, I've still got no sense of that child at all. So these children have learned that actually relationships are to be avoided really. The next type of insecure attachment we're going to look at is the ambivalently attached child. And for these children, the caregiver will have been very inconsistent and unpredictable. So, for example, maybe responding to the child's needs one day and comforting the child, and then maybe because of them feeling overwhelmed, the next day being a bit rejecting of the child. So they're really inconsistent, really unpredictable. So, of course, what these children learn is that things change all the time. And this results in them being quite watchful, quite clingy, a bit mistrusting in school. So how that would come out in their behaviour is they're often questioning all the time. So for example, you might say, go and get your coat, line up by the door, and they'd be the one saying, why do we need our coats? So these children often develop a need to control others as a way of managing their anxiety. So it's important to remember all these behaviours are developed as coping mechanisms. They're developed as coping mechanisms to manage their anxiety. And the last type of insecure attachment is the disorganised attachment. And for these children, often the parent has been frightened or is frightening themselves. So maybe more common in children who've experienced trauma, particularly domestic violence, where the caregiver is completely overwhelmed by their own needs. So these caregivers can sometimes be quite erratic, they might be a bit frightening for the child, and these children learn not to trust in others and they show quite a lot of behavioural disorganisation. So sometimes in school, they can be the children that just feel quite chaotic to be around. You know, they sort of come in from the playground and they're sort of hurling into class, and there's, you know, like this sort of, guess just this sort of trail of chaos behind them. So these children have extremely high levels of anxiety and they are trying to manage that all the time. So what can happen with these children is sometimes in class they can appear quite settled, they're fine, they're getting on with things, and then they might have a really quite extreme reaction to events. So, for example, their pencil slips and they start sobbing, and you'll say to them, "It's fine, it's only a pencil. We've got other pencils. Have another pencil," and they find it really hard to calm down and settle down, despite lots of reassurance from you. Okay, so now we've given a bit of an overview of the behaviours and these children, let's look at how this may play out in the classroom. Okay, so I have a classroom here. I'm just going to bring over. So, imagine this is our classroom here. Okay, so as the class teacher, we're going to put you at the front. Now, I appreciate that you don't always sit at the front, but we're going to put you at the front here. Okay, so if we think about our securely attached child, so remember these children are generally quite happy, quite settled, feel quite safe in the world, and you ask the children where they wanted to sit. I appreciate you probably don't do this, but it's quite useful to do it as an experiment. Maybe after you've watched this video, you could do that with your class. Just see if actually your sense of the children's attachment style is, you know, sort of correct in terms of how I'm describing it. So this is our securely attached child. So remember, these children generally quite happy, quite settled in the world, feel okay. So if you ask them where they wanted to sit in the class, where do you think they might sit? They'd probably choose to sit here. Yeah, somewhere in the middle. So they don't have to be really close to you and they don't have to be really far away, but they're quite happy, they want to see you, they're interested in their learning, so they'll sit themselves there. The next child we're going to look at is the avoidantly attached child. So remember, this child wants to avoid the relationship. They've learned that adults can be unpredictable, might reject them, so they want to reject the relationship, so they avoid the relationship with you. They often have friends, but they're very wary of adults. So where do you think they might sit? So they're going to sit themselves over here, okay, so in the corner. Now they're not going to sit with their back to you because that would draw attention to them and you would probably ask them to turn around and to face you. They equally may not face you because they're worried then that you might ask them a question, you might notice what they're doing. So they may be more likely to position themselves where they can keep an eye on you, but they're not quite looking. So these are the avoidantly attached children. The next one we're looking at is the ambivalently attached child. Now, these children have learnt that adults are really inconsistent, really unpredictable, might say one thing, do something else, might say no one day to something and yes to something the next. So these children are very much focused on the adult relationship. So they sit themselves as close as possible to you. So if they're in nursery or reception or year one, they may well try and get on your lap. If they're slightly older, they might sit near you, for example, if they're on the carpet, but they might start playing with your shoe or something. Okay, so they want to be as close as they can to you. And the last one we're going to look at is the disorganised attached child. And I'm going to put this child here. Okay. Now, what this child often likes is objects. Yeah, because this can help them to feel less anxious. So I'm going to give this child this lovely bit of red plastic here. Okay, so as a class teacher, understandably, you would move around the classroom. So you start walking over here to see what these children are doing. What do you imagine this child would do? This child would probably follow you because they want to be near the adults at all times. So you notice the child and you turn round. In fact, you may well practically trip over them. And what you're quite likely to say to the child is not, hello, how nice to see you, thank you for following me. You're probably likely to say, go and sit down and get on with your work. And you may well have a facial expression that communicates that you're not happy, and you may well sound a little bit cross. Your tone of voice might change a bit. So they go and sit down. Okay, and you start walking over here towards our avoidantly attached child, who maybe by then is very, very much focused on their work. These children often do lots and lots of work, but it might not be what you've asked them to do, okay, because they get really absorbed in what they're doing as a way of avoiding the relationship. So what this child might do is suddenly decide that they need the toilet, or maybe try and move away. Okay, we go over here now. So now you come to the disorganised child. So these are the children who often live with quite a lot of chaos. Things are extremely unpredictable, and maybe experience domestic violence. Okay, so quite interested in objects, often have lots of little things in their pockets or in their hands. Okay, so our disorganised child has just been out in the playground at break time, and he's found this lovely bit of red plastic. Wow, look how exciting that is. So he's got that in his hand and he's fiddling with it, and this is helping him to feel a bit less anxious, a bit more settled. Now, what might we say to him? We may well say to him, put it in your pocket. We may well say to him, go and put it in the bin. Okay, so imagine we say to him, go and put it in the bin. So he comes over to the bin over here. I'll move the tweets out of the way for now so you can see. So the bin's over here. So he comes over to the bin and he hovers by the bin because he doesn't want to put it in the bin. He loves this bit of red plastic. You may notice this and ask him to put it in the bin. So he does, reluctantly. He comes back to where he was sat. Do you think he spends the rest of the afternoon focused and engaged with his learning, or do you think he spends the rest of the afternoon trying to work out how to get that out of the bin? I would say that if a child needs something to fiddle with, give them something to fiddle with. Of course, put rules and boundaries around it like we do with anything. If he starts poking another child with it or throwing it across the room, then of course we need to put some boundaries in. Okay, so you've been all the way around and you've come back here. Now, our ambivalently attached child, remember this child is really, really preoccupied with the adult relationship. So they're constantly trying to work out what do they need to do to make you happy, to make sure you're pleased with them. So because you used a tone of voice and a facial expression that perhaps communicated that you weren't very happy, this child is feeling really anxious and really worried and trying to work out what she can do. Now, as human beings, we all have an internal dialogue. It's the tape that plays in your head constantly, telling you, what you've got to do, maybe running a commentary on what others think about you, or something you've done right or wrong. So for these children, their internal dialogue is always about what the adult thinks about them. So this child's internal dialogue might say something like, Mrs. Jones didn't look very happy then. I don't like it when Mrs. Jones isn't very happy with me. What can I do to make Mrs. Jones happy? I know, Mrs. Jones loves cats. At break time, I'll draw her a picture of a cat. Yeah, in fact, I wonder if she's got a brown or black cat. So when you come back, she's actually feeling quite happy because she's worked out what she can do to make you happy. However, she may well have not done much work or would have picked up her pen, but still actually not done what you've asked her to do. So you may well sound cross again. Okay. So it's really useful to be aware of attachment in terms of our children in school, because as you can see, it really helps us to understand some of the reasons behind the behaviour. Okay, so I'm just going to move that out of the way. So what I suggest you do is maybe spend some time really thinking about the children in your class and trying to work out which attachment style you think they've got.